Evening, everyone. I'm Rick Weather meteorologist Scotty Powell, and you're watching another Carolina's Weather Group discussion tonight as we talk about the SPC outlooks and what that means to you. I know you see a lot of percentages and colors and hash marks and all kinds of good stuff, and we're going to talk about that tonight, what that all means to you. And we have two guests tonight. We have Patrick Ellis and Chris Michaels. Both have been guests with us before, so you are familiar with them. I'll still let them introduce themselves. But first of all, we have someone who was not with us last week, and he's still feeling a little bit under weather, so he might be a little quiet tonight. But I'm going to let Joey Mosteller kind of let you know that he's okay. So, Joey, let him know.
Yeah, contrary to popular discussion, I am alive. But, yeah, I have been feeling a little under the weather the last week or so, so that's why you don't really see my face. I just used the picture, and I'm going to kind of be quiet, but I'll chime in from time to time if I hear something. So I'm kind of in the background. If you guys need me, yell my name or something if I'm not paying attention. So, but with that, I'll send it to our other normal panelist, which to be honest with you, Chris is almost becoming a normal panelist with us. But our normal panelist, I'll let Ricky introduce himself.
All right. Glad you're feeling a little bit better, Joey. Yeah. Long day here. I get up basically at, let's see, class starts at 11 and it goes till 8. So it's a fun day, just got a different equation. So the life of a meteorologist and planning an event coming up here in Charlotte in March. But other than that, just a pretty typical but warm day here in Charlotte. We got up to the lower 80s today for the first day of October. So I'm not complaining, but unfortunately I don't think it'll last long either. So Chris, there's some cold air coming your way too. Let's have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, talk about cold air. Anyways, I'm Chris Michaels, a weekend morning meteorologist with WCYB. We're based out of Bristol, Virginia. So we cover northeast Tennessee, southwest Virginia, and then a little bit of southeast Kentucky and northwest North Carolina. So like Ricky was saying, we've got change ahead. We actually were in the lower 80s as well today, hit a high of 82 at the Tri-Cities Airport, and I think we could eke out another degree or two come tomorrow. But come Friday, we're expecting a good chance of some storms. And speaking of, we're talking about the Storm Prediction Center and their outlooks tonight. I'm actually kind of surprised that we're not being monitored a little more closely than we currently are, because this is a strong system. Really seems to be our first front, which with a lot of gusto since July 27th, which I keep referring to that because that's really the only one severe weather event that I have under my belt. So we're not expecting anything comparable to that. But behind that front, we're actually going with a high of 59. Really, I think the GFS Moss is doing a decent job with this, and our team of meteorologists seems to think so too. So we're going with a high of 59 for Saturday, and then Saturday night into Sunday, going with a low of 34. And I just wrote down that would be the first time that we've gotten that low since April 24th. So it's going to be a little bit of a shock to the system, and we probably could see some frost, and I think we'll definitely see our first freeze of the year in the higher elevations. So should be an interesting weekend in weather. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, 34 degrees, that's chilly. Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man.
I'm telling you, I was in High Point, Greensboro today, and I left here in Morganton about 9 o'clock, and it was sunny and warm, and I got to Greensboro, and it was just cloudy and foggy, and the fog and clouds really didn't burn off till about 2 o'clock today, so it stayed like 72, 73 there all day. And I'm wondering if our next guest, Patrick Ellis, experienced that too, because it looked like on radar, it seemed like the Triad area and the eastern part of Carolina is held onto the cloud cover a little bit longer today. Patrick, it's all yours.
Oh, well, hopefully you guys can hear me. I don't know if my audio is up or not. Let's see. Is it working?
We got you. Yeah.
All right, awesome. That was kind of a rush job. I was when Scotty sent me a message on Facebook, I was trying to get back into the studio. We got a new Chipotle in town, and we think we're big stuff now. So everybody and their mother is standing over at the Chipotle. I thought it was going to be kind of slick and get an online order. It took an hour for the online order plus 15 minutes.
Oh, man.
For me standing there, so sitting back there in the back. My name is Patrick Ellis. I am the weekend meteorologist here at WNCT TV. in Greenville, and that's actually going to change very soon. But as far as the weather is concerned here in the east, actually we had the fog bank in the morning, and it got all the way to just north of Pitt County, and then it just kind of stayed there yesterday in the Edgecombe County, Nash County, places like that, and they stayed in the 60s and 70s all day, and we got up to like almost 80 here in Pitt County. It was only like a 20-mile difference between the observation site at Tarboro and Greenville. It's about 25 miles, and there was a big difference as far as temperatures are concerned. But today we got into the sun pretty quickly, and I think tomorrow's pretty much the same type of deal. We start off with fog, go to sun by the afternoon, maybe a stray shower. And like Chris was talking about, that next front coming down, I'm actually I'm interested as well as far as SPC is concerned. They've got a no severe weather project, and I think that it's going to be later in the evening that storm system gets in here. It may be overnight, but still think that we could get a couple strong storms along it. It's kind of a high impact forecast for us because we've got high school football, we've got ECU homecoming. It's at noon on Saturday. And we've got the seafood festival down in Morehead City. So we've got so many things going on. And it's kind of riding on the weather. But behind the front, I've got a high of 67 here in Greenville and 70 at the coast for Sunday. I got a low of 48 on Sunday morning. So we're ready for the cool shot of air here in the east. But I'm kind of holding on to the last bit of summer in the back of my mind. But eventually it's going to come, and might as well be right on cue with October.
Yeah, that's me. I'm holding on to summer too. I like summer too much, so anyways, that's just my preference. But anyway, tonight it's interesting because Chris and Patrick both alluding to the possibility of some strong thunderstorms coming in with the cold front Friday night. We're going to be talking about the Storm Prediction Center and basically what they issued tonight, and so I'm looking for a really good discussion. We hear a lot about this out in the Midwest. That comes more into play than it does around here. So with that, I'm going to give it over to Ricky, as he always does and conducts the interviews. And again, we have a question and answer session here for the show. So if any of you guys watching have any specific questions, you can relay them to us, and we can ask the experts, and we'll go from there. So Ricky, it's all yours, my friend.
All right, thank you, Scotty. Yeah, we're talking about SPC. I have a friend out in Missouri, and he was at the third tornado warning issued for his house this evening. So that popped up right before you gave it to me. So like, what the heck is going on? Anyway, the SPC does have a slight risk out to the west, but the question is slight risk going to change? And the answer to that one is partially yes, partially no. For many years, a lot of people have become accustomed to the SPC's slight, moderate, and high and seat text outlooks. Well, the seat text outlook over the years has kind of got a lot of grief for not really displaying the risk as well as maybe it should. So the SPC now, starting officially coming up here very soon, actually, I forget the actual date, Wednesday, October 22nd, so only 22 days away, they're going to change to a 5-tiered system. It's going to go from marginal, slight, enhanced, moderate, and high. And the question for all of our meteorologists here, and especially the public, is how do we decide which one is a higher risk, and how do we depict, the risk categories from one another? So, Patrick or Chris, I'm going to throw it to you and let you explain a little bit about what each one means and why one is worse than the other, per se.
Chris, you want to go, or?
Yeah, I've got a sheet of paper right here that's actually outlining all the percentages. I'm not all high-tech with sharing images or anything, so I've got the sheet of paper here. So basically what we've got marginal is going to take the place of C-text. That's what my understanding is. You're still going to have the slight category, but at the upper end of the slight category. Now, for those who don't really know, these run off of percentages, and those percentages sometimes can be interpreted as climatological. So for 1 week where you would normally expect such and such a condition, then you have this other condition that says it's 10 times more likely that Y is going to happen. So the upper end of the slight category is now being taken, is now being replaced with what we're calling enhanced, and then you have moderate and high. Now, for some people, this has been a subject of debate, and for myself, it's been a little bit of a toying back and forth with different things, and it really seems to be from a social science perspective that what do these words mean to people? Do the percentages line up with it? I'm going to talk a little bit later, and like I was telling you guys before the show, the only experience I really have with a major severe weather event is July 27th. So I feel like every time I've been on here, I've mentioned something about that day. But we're going to talk about it because there was a lot of confusion, and it was tough to communicate one of the changes that had come up. So later on, we'll talk about a blog post in which I kind of outlined my thought processing towards the new change, which at the time I wrote the post, it was just experimental, but now we know it's going into effect, like Ricky just said, at 15 UTC, I believe, on October 22nd. So that's the changes that are being made. It's, like Ricky said, a 5-tier system as opposed to a 4. So I'm interested to see how it works out, but this might not be the only change. I have a feeling like something's going to change after this. Just a gut feeling.
And Patrick, I'll lead you into this one. We had that big, I'll call it the North Carolina outbreak of 2014 because it didn't have a name, but it was a pretty big event for our eastern portions of the state. How did you go about describing that event beforehand and the potential severity of it when all we had was, the slight risk category that day?
That was a very interesting event because I remember being here the day before, and me and my chief meteorologist Davidson looked at each other and said, "Call that great." It was 12 hours. It was about, I would say, about 24 hours in advance, and we really didn't have a good handle. I don't think the models even picked up on it really that well until about 12 hours in advance. When I looked back at the SPC outlooks leading up to that event, there was a slight risk that was issued that the day before, that afternoon, during the day 2 afternoon update, and it was only geared towards damaging winds and hail, and we had already been talking about that for a couple of days, and so we had already kind of put the groundwork as far as, hey, we're going to have some storms, and not everybody's going to see them, but yeah, there's going to be a couple of stronger storms out there. Then it all just changed in about a 12-hour period. We went from, we're just going to see a couple of storms kind of firing up during the afternoon to, this may be a mini-scale tornado outbreak. And when we looked at the data, I think all the tornadoes that day, I think we had all very localized area of about 150 miles across. Our DMA, our viewing area is about 300 miles north, south, east, west, pretty much, it feels like, when you kind of look at the whole thing. But it was that northern tier counties north of Highway 70, and when we talked about it, we got in there that afternoon, and I remember coming in that afternoon right before everything kind of went to down into the tubes real quick, and I looked at our morning meteorologist and said, what are we going to do here? And he looked at me, I looked at him, and he went on the air and he said, we have the potential for tornadoes at this point. Kind of looking at parameters, the helicity had just spiked up to like 200, I think it was like 350 meters square per second square. I mean, like it was a very localized thing, and the models had a horrible time picking it up, and no one would have known unless you had looked at like 6Z. And traditionally, I'm not a 6Z forecaster. But I looked at 6Z that morning when I woke up, and I said, "No, I don't trust this." And needless to say, it in a higher end slight risk, and what would have now be looking forward to the new SPC guidelines, would be a enhanced risk of severe weather, which we kind of even threw into the mix and said, hey, you know, there's a good chance of severe weather during our noon show this afternoon. And I remember that day being sunny. It was nice. It was like 75, 80 degrees. And the next thing you know, we had these supercells firing up across the area. And, you know, Ricky was chasing that day out here, and, you know, out here in the plains of eastern North Carolina. But, yeah, that outbreak, I think, would have been served a little better if the SPC had already gone to this, because everything was a slight risk. And I remember somebody asking me, it's like, do you think they'll go moderate? And I thought at that point that they should have gone moderate because of just the way that the atmosphere was cooking that day. And they stayed at the highest end slight. We had already kind of said, you know, there. And after that, we just kind of went off and running through that afternoon with, I think it was 12 tornadoes that afternoon.
So let me ask you this, going off of that. As a TV station, you know, your job isn't so much to say what the SPC puts out. It's to display the impacts. Have you or any stations you know gone and just kind of forgot what the SPC is saying instead of slight, moderate, high, and been like, hey, this is our scale? I know the Weather Channel's used their TorCon scale, and I've seen a few meteorologists use slight, enhanced, moderate, and high already. Have you guys done any of that now, or do you plan to in the future?
We actually implemented, this was after the fact, when we went to the First Alert branding, we implemented a scale called the First Alert Index, which is basically, you know, low, medium, and high of, you know, here's your impacts, here's what you can expect. And we usually put that out like a day before so you can kind of get the idea and then update it as, you know, things update themselves. I do remember that day they put it up on a graphic, and I wrote enhanced risk of severe weather on the graphic, and it was primarily for northern counties. So we've already kind of gotten away from the word slight because I always felt like the word slight just never seemed right. You know, it just seemed like it was, you know, kind of a throwaway thing. And sometimes when we've seen slight risk busts, we've seen slight risk overachieved, we've seen moderate and high risk busts. And, you know, it just kind of depends. But, you know, when it comes to a slight risk, you know, some days it seemed like it would be a marginal thing, and they just decided, hey, we'll pop a slight risk on there. Or it was a situation where, you know, it could have easily escalated to something higher, and in this instance it did.
So going off the new scale, you know, would it have been easier, you think, to sum up a day like that with the new scale?
I think it would, you know, because if you would have looked at the weather that day and saw our southern, you know, Jacksonville, New Bern, I don't even think they saw a drop of rain at that system. And at that point, I think we were all underneath a slight risk. I think they had expanded it out enough to where it was pretty much covering our entire viewing area. But the main core of that thing was sitting right at the corner of Highway 64 and Highway 17 up towards, say, Williamston, Windsor, in that part of the state, and kind of pushing up into the northeastern portion of the state up towards the Tidewater. But our southern tier counties saw nothing. And I know down towards Wilmington, they saw nothing out of that whole system. We were on the air for 7 hours straight, and we had people in Jacksonville calling us like, "You need to get off the air. You ain't talking about nothing. Nothing dealing with down here. It's sunny." And meanwhile, we've got a supercell coming right towards Greenville that very likely, actually did produce a tornado on the northwest side of town, and I've got people down in Jacksonville. We're looking at the cameras, and it's sunny.
Mm-hmm.
What?
I think that the expansion can be good and it can be bad, but I still think that for us as meteorologists, when they get in there and they start really toying away at some of this stuff, I think for the meteorologists, it's going to be a good thing to tiers. for the general public, that's a difference. I feel like we'll probably get into that as well in this chat.
Yeah, and Chris, I know you do a lot with, or you're into social science a lot. Is there any research on, more parameters confusing people? Because people like things simple. Let's put it that way. When you have more different levels, is it easier or maybe harder to understand?
Right. Yeah. And I'm sorry, guys. My connection cut out, so I missed most of this. Most of the discussion, but I'll continue on with where you just started. So I haven't read anything as far as social science studies that have gone on, but just general thinking when I talk to people, and most of the time I'll talk to my parents and ask them questions because obviously they don't necessarily think like maybe we do, but they always people always seem to go along the lines of less is more. When it comes to graphics, the less you put on a graphic, maybe the more it communicates. Maybe the less categories we have, maybe the more that communicates. So I think now would be a good time to tell you guys about the blog post that I'd written at the end of June, actually. And what I had done was I'd gone through every SPC outlook from March 20th through June 30th. And looked at your C-text, your slight, your moderate, and your high risks, and tried to guesstimate how many storm reports for tornado, wind, and hail were in each category. So there's 3 biases or 3 extra notes that I have to preface this with, and I did so in my blog. That okay, so every risk is going to be of a different size. So we get that. That's a little bit of a bias. And every risk is going to depend on your location and your time of year. We all know that I think you're going to see more tornado reports out in the upper Midwest and in the Central Plains than you're going to see in Northeast Tennessee or Southwest Virginia. And then again, that these are just rough approximations. So based off of that, I really wanted to isolate the slight risk because that seemed to be the thing that confused people the most. Why are you telling me that there is a slight risk when you're expecting severe weather? When you tell me it's a slight chance for rain, you're telling me that, well, there's not a great chance for rain. You're likely not going to see it. But slight risk, all of a sudden, you're talking about something different. So I tried to isolate that. What I found is that per slight risk from March 20th through June 30th, that there was an average of 5 tornado reports, 46 wind reports, and 37 hail reports. And that's all from the 1230 convective outlook. So like I said, being that there's biases and extra little tidbits that I had to add in there, is that data concrete? No. But it goes to show you that within each slight risk, there's something to be said that there's a good likelihood of severe weather, which really doesn't play towards the slight word. So why we're even keeping that is a topic of debate, and that's what I put in my blog, is that I'm not so sure that the slight risk has a place in this. I don't know why we're holding on to that. I love the idea of the word marginal because C-text really doesn't tell you anything about the risk. General thunderstorm, that's a little bit better, but marginal at least communicates that, there's times when you see some storm reports within that green shaded area. So marginal is a good idea. I just don't know why we're so hard pressed to hold on to this slight word. It's a little confusing. So I like the wording of enhanced, but even at that, some people may think that enhanced is a bit higher than moderate, or some people might think that moderate is a bit higher than enhanced. So you're starting to get into that social science of what do people perceive with different words. So at that point, and I know I've been talking for a little bit here, is it better to talk about level 1 or level 2 or level 3, or call it a code green, a code yellow, or a code orange, something along those lines, because words really play with people's perceptions. And at that point, is it harmful or is it helpful? It's a debate on multiple ends.
Yeah, I have a little to add to that, Chris. I did some studying here the past couple of days about this, and I looked at all the high-risk days that was issued by the SPC, and I'll go into that a little bit later, but I was looking at some more of the more recent tornado outbreaks or tornadoes that we would all recall, and actually the Moore tornado occurred on a day that was issued a slight risk for that area.
Wow.
And that
Wow.
when we think of Moore, we see the destruction of what happened there, and going back into it, that was a slight risk day. So I agree with you. I think the play on words here, I totally my thinking would be I would ditch those out and go with numbers. I like the idea of level 1, level 2, level 3, so on. But yeah, when you think of the Moore tornado, you wouldn't think of that being a slight risk day, but it actually was.
Absolutely. No, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. And I honestly didn't even know that about the Moore tornado day, that it was in a slight risk. But it just goes to show you that, number one, that weather is inexact, and number two, that maybe these words just really aren't working. Because to me, if you tell me slight, I'm not thinking of an F5 coming into my town. That's just completely out of the question at that point.
And that, as critical as we've been about the Weather Channel sometimes in their Torcon forecast, I've never really been a huge hater of it. It may not have a huge scientific formula, to figure out the number, but in the social science criteria, it kind of works because people understand that 1 to 10 scale.
Mm-hmm. Right. It puts things in a little bit of a better and more understandable perspective. So yeah, and a lot of people can hate on it all they want, but I think you pretty much hit it right there. That it's, from a social science perspective, it makes sense.
I kind of agree with that. Even though I kind of cringe at the fact that people will email you or text you or something and say, what's the Torcon value for today? I have no clue because I'm not watching the Weather Channel. But the thing is, people, and I don't know. We had the last time I was on, we had the conversation about pops, and we talked about the wording with scattered and widespread and numerous showers and thunderstorms or something of that nature. So it kind of goes in line with that almost. That we talked about, instead of 20% chance for rain, say isolated showers out there. And this one, we're kind of talking about the opposite, because people do know severe weather for some reason. I think it is because of the Weather Channel with numbers. They kind of gear things towards a number. So if you were to take, say, a marginal risk, that would be like a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or something like that, depending on the severity of it. And then you kind of just go from there to figure out what's going to happen as far as the numbers are concerned. But I don't like the Torcon because of the fact that I don't know the basis of the science behind it. I heard that there's about 5 different things that go into it, but I don't know what it is, so I'm not going to use it. If I don't know what it is, then it's not going on. But as far as the understanding, the social science behind it, yeah, the number probably would do better. But also another thing, when we're talking about these outlooks, I think a lot of this actually goes back to the fact that the SPC outlooks really are more geared towards the meteorologists and the weather enthusiasts and things of that nature, because we do understand. If you read the discussion on like today, more than likely it's going to be a whole bunch of weather jargon that the normal everyday Joe is not going to understand. They're not going to understand a mid-level shortwave. They're not going to understand helicity values. So, I think there's kind of a little thing here that we as communicators can take from, the wording of marginal, slight, enhanced, moderate, and high, and kind of gear that towards what a person would perceive it as. You get that information from the SPC, or you get that derivation from and cast, and you tell it to the people how you think that they can understand it.
But Patrick, let's look at it this way a little bit. Look at the NHC website. When you go on there, the information is pretty clear-cut. I mean, the forecast track is pretty easy to pick out. Maybe the forecast uncertainty code's a little off. People don't understand the impacts can expand outside that, but they've broken it down to where it can be understood by anyone. And if you Google severe weather, or severe storms, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be taking the Storm Prediction Center eventually. So it
Yeah.
almost makes you wonder if they should have some more graphic-friendly products and some more user-friendly products on their website, especially on the big homepage. I know they usually put the summary up there that says, outbreak of tornadoes expected over these areas. Then they refer you back to your local National Weather Service office.
Yeah, I mean, like when you look at it, it'll link you, I think, to the public hazards outlook for, I guess, for that area, or I think the SPC actually issues
PWOs.
some of that as well. But as far as going to their website, especially since they've changed it, it's not very clear cut and dry of where things are. You see the little box over here in the corner that has the outlook, and it kind of scrolls through and everything like that. But as far as trying to navigate that thing, if I was not a meteorologist, I wouldn't have a clue how to navigate that thing and try to figure out what I'm looking for.
And Chris, I want to kind of, we're talking about numbers in the SPC website. I want to kind of toss this to you because I'm not sure of the numbers back during the July 27th or the outbreak in April, Patrick. You look at the website and you see 2% chance, 5% chance, 15, 30, 45, and 60. What was the Kingsport, Tennessee area? What was the percentage-wise with tornadoes? And then when you answer that, I want to ask you a follow-up question. If I'm an average Joe person and I see that my area has a 5% tornado risk, I'm going to ignore that because that's a 95% chance nothing's going to happen. But then you see something pretty bad happen. So I want to get both of you guys' take on that.
Okay, 1 second. I'm just spilling papers all over my floor here because I have the numbers all out in front of me. I get really excited when I hear numbers. So let's talk about not April 27th, but July 27th. Yeah, that was our day. So during the 13 UTC outlook, the day one outlook for July 27th, there was a moderate risk around all of Southwest Virginia, and there was a slight risk around all of Northeast Tennessee. That entailed, within the moderate risk, there was a 10% tornado with a significant around it. That did not change for the 12:30 p.m. outlook, but what happened was that the moderate was taken completely out. So earlier in the morning, we go posting our graphic of the SPC outlook. We're talking about a moderate risk for severe weather. Multiple tornadoes are possible. We were talking about damaging winds. We were talking about damaging hail, and I'm looking at that graphic right there. And there was a significant around the hail risk as well. What had happened was that it changed from moderate to slight only because the wind probability went from 45% down to 30%. That was the only thing that changed. But all of a sudden now we went from a moderate to a slight. And so then I was still the only one in the weather center. We called in the troops in early afternoon. So I'd say around 2:30 was when people started coming in. And I had to go and communicate that on social media. And of course the one about the moderate risk had gotten shared like crazy, which was great. Facebook actually cooperated with that a little bit. And then we also had our blog post on our website. Like I told you, I took a little bit of influence from Brett Panovich, which it's an awesome idea, and obviously it's proven to work for him. So it's really worked for us as well. But then we had to update it with a slight. We had to go telling people that all of a sudden now that area that was in a moderate risk was in a slight risk. But pretty much nothing had changed. There was just one probability that changed ever so slightly, and all of a sudden you were in a different category. So that was really weird and confusing, and thank goodness most people read into what we were writing, because social science shows that most of the time people just like to look at pictures and they draw their conclusion from there. But they actually read the text and we said, look, not much has changed. We're still expecting the same impact. It's just one probability went down from there. So that is the answer to your first question. As far as the second one goes, because I just, now with the tornado risk, it was 10% for Southwest Virginia. And during that day, I thought that 10% should have been moved down towards the south and east. I thought that from the whole time, just because looking at photographs and skew-T soundings and knowing that that vortex was coming in. But it was a 10%. If you tell someone that there's a 10% chance of rain, they think nothing of it. But the way I've tried to interpret it, and it's actually one of the interpretations I believe that's listed with the Storm Prediction Center, and don't quote me on that, but that 10%, what I've interpreted that as is that during the week of the outlook, you have average or normal conditions. And I put those in quotes because the normal word just doesn't really work. But that 10% says it is X amount times as likely to have that event happen. So let's say that any average week from July 24th until July 30th, your tornado outlook is 0.5%. All of a sudden now it's a 10%. That looks really serious to you. That looks like, yep, we are confident those tornadoes, there's going to be tornadoes in the area. Because you're referring back to that average percentage for that week. So on any normal day within the week, tornado percentage would be at about 0.5%. And I don't know the number for our area, but let's just say that's the case. That 10% comes into play, and climatologically, it looks a heck of a lot more likely, even though to a normal average Joe, they see 10% and they're like, oh, okay, moving on. But meanwhile, it shows that conditions are pretty favorable. So that's my interpretation of the percentages. Whether or not you guys think that's correct, I'd like to hear from you on that, because you know, that's something I've read into, but not absolutely 100% confident with. So if you guys have any thoughts, please share them, because I'd love to learn from you.
I would like to throw that to Patrick, because Patrick, you are more accustomed in the eastern part of the state to see those higher numbers. You know, the 15% or the 30%, whatever that may be. What is the take of the people down in Eastern Carolina compared to those outlooks than us here in the mountains and the western Piedmont?
Well, you know, I guess Eastern North Carolina is pretty much the tornado alley of the whole state. But as far as, you know, kind of looking back at our day, April 25th, and I was just kind of going back over the SPC outlooks. That day, you know, kind of going with what Chris was talking about, we had a slight risk out that day. And the early morning update had a 5% outlook for tornadoes. The morning update came out with a 5% outlook for tornadoes. It took until 12:30 for the update to come out and say, hey, we've got a 10% hazard. It ramped, and again, it came from the small scale, basically saying, you know, this is not going to be good. But we stayed at a slight risk, and I think it does go back to a perception thing. If I were to go up on TV and say there's a 10% chance that there's going to be a tornado today, you know, the perception is 10% chance for rain. I don't see it, but you know, when I see a 10% chance for a tornado, that gets me riled up, because I know that that's a very high end risk as far as tornadoes are concerned. You know, it gets me nervous, because I'm like, I got to go hopefully not kill somebody. But as far as the general public's concerned, they see that if I were to put that graphic up there and said, you know, here's the outlook for tornadoes, you pretty much almost have to just explain it to them. It's like, this is a higher end risk of tornadoes. I know it says 10%, and that seems scary, at least. Weeks ago, and I used to show a PowerPoint at the end. I would talk about severe weather safety. It was a high school, and I would talk about April 16th. Well, I delved into April 25th this time, and when I did, and I explained it to them, I was like, this is what happened today. And You know, a lot of people in that classroom had people who were affected by it. Then they have family that live over in Beaufort, over in Beaufort County, who got just, you know, demolished over in Witchers Beach and Chocowinity. And, you know, it's fresh in their mind. So whenever I was explaining it to them, you know, I said, there was a chance for storms that day. We knew that. But I will tell you to your face right here, I know, as far as a forecaster is concerned, I didn't forecast that system very well at all. I will tell you that to your face, and let me explain why. And when I showed them the SPC outlook and I said, this came down at 12:30 that afternoon. You know, you're sitting here in school, and at 12:30, pretty much everybody's at work. Out there, hey, you know, by the way, there's going to be an outbreak of tornadoes this afternoon, and, you know, happening at rush hour as well. It was, when I see that a 10% hatched area, me as a meteorologist, I know this is not good. But if I were to show that on TV, I would have to sit there and explain for about 3 minutes. It's like, let me explain to you, this is not just your 10% chance for rain. This is a 10% chance for a high end, you know, this is a higher end event than what we've been talking about. You almost have to change gears completely from where you were just 6 hours prior to, wow, this is now a much more significant event. And that one did scare us here, because when we saw the hatching, we're like, that's not good. That's not good at all. And I think anybody would say the same thing. I remember, I think it was last year sometime. I want to say it was like February or something. No, it wasn't. It was like a huge damaging wind risk for the Piedmont that never came to fruition at all. The line fell apart as it was moving across the state, and we ended up getting the tail end of it, and it ended up being worse than what they even had outlooked for us the entire time. But the system had fallen apart in the Piedmont, and everybody was like, what happened? You know, you were talking about damaging winds, and then I'm sitting over here getting rocked. And just dealing with the changes. I think the other thing is that people want to hear the forecast, and when they hear the forecast too, they want to be able to say, okay, I know what I can expect. But especially when it's the midday, how do you get to those people, especially when they're sitting at work and they're trying to get their livelihoods together, and you don't know how to reach them. You know, you can do it on Facebook. I know I sit here at work and play on Facebook half the day, like days like this where it's sunny outside. But the general person who's out there, say it's going to be a tornado today in a 50-mile radius of Greenville, North Carolina. To me, I'd be like, oh, well, isn't that interesting? If I was just a common guy, and I hate saying that because, you know, I want to think that people would understand it, and, you know, I think eventually you do need to just kind of go into it and explain to people how things how things are formulated, I guess, especially when it's coming down from the Weather Service or it's coming down from SPC. But that guy sitting there at the construction site, I post on Facebook, he's just kind of looking through at lunch, and he sees 10% outlook for tornadoes. Okay. He goes on about his business, and little does he know what it actually means. I think that we need to do a little better job, maybe us as the communicators, of explaining the risk a little bit better so the general public can understand. I want to kind of go back to the fact that a lot of this, or a lot of the things that we see, really the general public, weather enthusiasts, because we understand the stuff. But to the general public, if I post that graphic up there and say, you know, 10% chance for a tornado, what does that really mean for the person at home? I know what it means, but what do they know? I think we just need to do a little better job of educating.
Yeah, and one thing that I've mentioned on here before, and I'll keep mentioning it because it just seems to play it seems to be so true. For those of you who don't know who Nate Johnson is, you need to look him up right now because he knows so much about the business, from being a radar guru to social media to just being a phenomenal forecaster. But the most important thing that he's ever taught me is that the people out there don't think like the people in here.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the weather center, and out there is everybody outside the weather center. That could be anchors, that could be producers, and that could be the construction workers that Patrick was just talking about. Our job as a communicator is to try and bridge that gap. It's not so much us versus them. It should just be us. But then at the same time, we're sitting here debating about what the Storm Prediction Center is saying. So is it an us versus them that all three of us need to come together and figure out a way to start thinking like each other? So our job is to get the general public to not so much think like us, but at the same time, we're trying to think like them. So when you're talking about that 10%, your first thought should be, what am I trying to communicate? What do I need the person who's watching me on TV, who's checking their Facebook, what do I need them to come away with? Do I even mention that 10%? Or do I just say, hey, you in that shaded area of red, you're under risk today for possibility of tornadoes? Do you even mention that number, or do you just say that we're looking at ingredients, and the Storm Prediction Center is doing that as well, that hint towards this impact? So I think as social media becomes stronger, I think we're continuing to bridge the gap between us and the public, and as our communication with NOAA and all their services becomes stronger, we're bridging that gap as well. So I think there's progress, but there's still progress, obviously, to be made.
Yeah, and that's one thing. A couple of things on hit on. Daniel, welcome to the show. Matt, welcome to the show. They came in late. But one thing I wish they wouldn't do is, I think sometimes the information is too much out there. I think the category percentages, I think they should be kind of kept closed network to the meteorologist side and not make that public, because anybody can go into the SPC website, scroll down and see a 5%, 2%, 10%, whatever the case may be. Yeah, I don't think they need to see that. That's why they tune into TV, radio, social media, whatever the case may be. That's why they tune in, is to get that weather information. We're kind of the middle part. We get the information, and then we communicate it to the people where they can understand it. So I kind of believe, or kind of think, that sometimes the information is too much to be out there. I think it should be limited to who sees that. Second of all, we had a question to the point of what does hatched mean. One of our viewers is wanting to know what hatched means. They heard Patrick say it. So I know, Chris, you have a comment to that. Maybe we can talk about hatched and then go to the comment.
Yeah, so hatched is another word for when the Storm Prediction Center says that there is a significant threat for a certain impact, and those three impacts that they track are tornadoes, wind, and hail. So when you see hatched, it looks like a black outline with dashed lines within that outline. And basically what that means is there's a significant, severe, not watch, but a significant threat for severe weather in that. So that's the answer to that question. And as far as my comment to Scotty is, there's a fine line between a communicator and a regurgitator. You can't just regurgitate information. You've got to take that information and communicate it in a way that people are going to understand. So that's something that sometimes we struggle with, is that we just take everything that we see and communicate it, but you have to pick the right things. And and this gets back to my station, our brand is getting the facts right. What we strive to do is get the right facts. So through each story that we have, we pick out the facts that we think are really going to tell a good story, or from a weather perspective, we pick out the certain things that are really going to tell that story. So, like I said, there's a fine line between a communicator and a regurgitator, and it's a battle that a lot of us have to fight.
Yeah. I know Patrick's got a screenshot of the hatch.
Yeah, I see that. That's a better representation than what I was saying.
Yeah, that was that's from the April 25th outbreak, and that was our outlook that literally the 3 hours before everything hit the fan. But the 10%, and it has little dashes through that outlook for a tornadic risk. I think it's within a given point of that area, 25 miles of a given point, it's a better risk of an EF2 or greater tornado. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think that's right.
Yeah.
But that was the outlook that day. We had, I think, 2 or 3 EF2s and an EF3 that afternoon. Or no, 2. I think it was, or 1 EF2 and no, there was like 5 of them up in northeastern North Carolina. That was I could go into a whole rant about what happened in northeastern North Carolina that day, but there were like 2 EF2 tornadoes that were like on the ground simultaneously, pretty much, and tracked like 40 miles, and there was only, I think, like 1 tornado warning out at one point, and for the rest of it was like a severe thunderstorm warning. But that day was, 10% hatch. And if I were just, if I had no meteorological training whatsoever, and I was severe weather in eastern North Carolina on that day, and saw a graphic like that, and saw 10%, and saw the hatching, I would not know what I was looking at. Even though they got the key down here at the bottom, it doesn't seem like that's that big of a risk because you've got 60% and significant. And if I had never looked at anything, I would think like April 27th was significant, which I don't think it was. I think it was 45% that day on April 27th, 2011. So, it just kind of gives you an idea. I guess once you kind of look at these things and you actually understand it after a while, you do end up kind of melding into your own mind. And going off of the branding thing, we're first alert and not on your side. And our thing is about being community-based and making sure that you know that we are there for you. And the first alert branding kind of ties into that. It's like, we're there for you first. Especially, I think also, in this day and age, everybody wants to be first. And sometimes you just need to hold off on it. We've seen issues like, slight risk days that just end up busting or something like that. You put the risk out there, but then you need to put your own meteorological spin on it and say, yeah, there's a slight risk today, but let me explain the factors of why this could be a big fat bust or why this could be more significant, especially right now with just the delineation of slight risk. And that's why I think that this will end up being, for meteorologists, actually pretty good. But for the common person, I don't know if the convective outlook changes are going to be all that friendly.
And I think that's a really good spot to wrap it up there, Scotty. And go ahead.
I was just saying, I thought I heard a tornado warning.
You did. Yeah, it caught my attention. Meanwhile, in Missouri, but yeah, I kind of share the same thoughts as you, Patrick. I'm curious as to how the public will perceive it. Now I've got to come up with a new word for slight. I used to use enhanced. I got to come up with a new word for that.
Yeah, exactly. Overall, maybe elevated. Elevated.
Yeah, elevated would work, I guess.
Yeah. I have a couple of things. I told you guys a little bit earlier in the show. I was doing some research, and this is just based off of the high-risk days. And a couple of days that I want to kind of talk about, or maybe just briefly we can speak about it. Well, first one is April 16th, what Patrick was talking about. That was a high-risk day. The outcome of that was 52 tornadoes and 26 people perished during that event. The April 27th event that affected Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, that was 205 tornadoes with 319 deaths. That was the most tornadoes ever occurred in a one-day span. Another one that I want to hit on it, and it was really crazy because the crazy stat. April 14th, 2013, this was back in Oklahoma and Kansas. They issued a high risk on the second day, a day 2 outlook. Okay, now this is a high risk day 2 outlook, and we didn't really talk about the different outlooks and stuff, but basically day 1 is the current day, and day 2 and on is talking about days to come. But out of that, is issuing the high risk on the second day, there was 83 tornadoes and only 6 deaths. So to me, that tells me somebody was listening, somebody was paying attention, and somebody was actually doing their job right because people were alerted and only 6 people perished. And I wrote down there was 3 F3s, 2 F4s, and 1 F5 during that outbreak. So, you know, to have 83 total and to have some fairly strong tornadoes and only 6 deaths occur, I mean, that's, yeah, as much as we can down, and I'll be the first one to say that I don't like the SPC's approach with wording and stuff like that. But at least on that day, April 14th, 2013, someone was doing their job right because 6 deaths is, I mean, that's 6 people, but there could have been a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, none of what I've said so far has meant to knock the guys at the Storm Prediction Center, because obviously they're incredibly smart people and have done a lot to further their knowledge and talk with social science people in trying to make this change. So none of what I've said is meant to knock any of them, because what they do is excellent. It's just there's always room for improvement, and especially when it comes to this wording, not scenario, I'm trying to think of the word, this whole wording dilemma that we're still, I think, going to face. It's there's always room for improvement and always room for debate and discussion. So I think I'm glad that I was a part of this to get some other thoughts, because it's something to definitely sit down and think about.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off of that and say, you know, I love what the SPC does. The guys over there, they do a great job. I think we all kind of have our own favorite forecaster that writes the discussions and everything like that. We all, it's like we all, but this has been a top 8 since I think last year when they announced that this was actually going to happen, and people in the Weather Enterprise kind of got up in arms about it. You know, some people defending, some people going against it. I think it's a healthy conversation, and like Chris said, it is definitely something that, you know, we can talk about an improvement, and in years to come, maybe, you know, some of the things that we suggest or some of the things that go on in this kind of time period, looking ahead, we can maybe tweak some of the things that were wrong or we just felt like didn't work out all that great. It seems that, of course, it's got to go up the bureaucratic ladder before that all happens, but at least, you know, at least there's somebody there. You know, the guys over there at the SPC, they know severe weather like nobody's business. I wish I could do severe weather like them. And I aspire to be one of those SPC Outlook forecasters, but you know, when it actually comes, all trickles down from, you know, from the head of the National Weather Service all the way down, head of NOAA all the way down, and you know, sometimes you know, things work and sometimes things don't. This will likely work and work fine, but there's going to be probably some tweaks in years down the road to make it better.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. They do an amazing job over in Norman, Oklahoma, and I would not want their jobs whatsoever because that's pretty intense over there. Not counting that they're in the middle of Tornado Alley themselves. But they do a great job, and like everyone has said, you know, we're gonna have to tweak this system, and yeah, I like the word user friendly. We need to make it as user friendly as possible, because with as much access as everyone has now, you know, a lot of people look at that, especially out in the Midwest. You know, a lot of people look at that and they kind of become their own meteorologists. Oh, that's going to be all right, or I may need to get some shelter. A very healthy debate and discuss tonight. I also just kind of a few tornadoes that hit last year. I told you the Moore tornado was on a slight risk day. The El Reno tornado and the Granbury tornado, the El Reno with the ones with the Weather Channel being hit by, and the Granbury that happened the week before Moore, both of those were on moderate risk days. So, you know, these tornadoes, I feel like some of them, they get more attention than others just because of the media coverage and stuff like that. So overall, I think they do a great job, and like everyone has said, I think, you know, a little tweak and a little bit of making the users more involved in that, I think it'll be a great thing. And like I said, I wouldn't want their job at all. All right, Ricky, Daniel, you guys have any closing comments or thoughts?
Nah, I don't really. I'm sorry I came in late this evening. Had some sporting events to cover, but you know, you did bring up some good points with the SPC and how they outlook stuff. There can be some confusion, especially when you start looking at 2% probability or 10, because just to the normal person, they're not going to think about anything like that. And I also would have to agree with Scotty. Sometimes I think this information does kind of get out there in the public when maybe it should be kind of held closer to the vest, because our job as, you know, TV people or social media people, we want to bridge the general public from the forecasters and tell them, you know, what's really going to happen. And then that, you know, the general public can go to the SPC website, and then they're going to be able to just see it for themselves. They're going to be confused. And sometimes I'm not going to say it defeats the purpose or anything, but it causes a little bit more confusion than it really should be. That's just my opinion.
And I agree with Daniel. I think, you know, sometimes these forecasts aren't really made for the public, but they get out there. So it seems like over the next year or so, and I think in the future, eventually, as social science becomes more and more and more in our domain of meteorology, they're going to have to potentially adapt the way they do it now and see what works better, just so much for the public as well. Maybe just a different product for them instead of just these outlooks. So interesting. We'll see how it works out as we go through October and eventually go through the next couple of years. So, okay.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Guys, I'm gonna let you guys plug yourself with Chris and Patrick. How the viewers can get in touch with you guys and on social media and stuff like that. So, Chris, I'll let you go first, and then we'll kick it over to Patrick.
All right, guys. Well, again, thank you for having me on. I've been here for a few of these discussions and keep learning more and more, so it's awesome. Ways you can get in touch with me: Facebook, just look up Chris Michaels, WCYB. On Twitter, at WCYB_Michaels. And I think I finally included that on the lower third there in the superscript or subscript, whatever it is, underneath my shining face there. And also through email, cmichaels@WCYB.com. Anytime you have any questions or any cool weather pictures, just send them my way. I'd love to talk to you.
Patrick?
He knows. For me, it's nothing's going to change. I'm actually moving stations in the next 2 weeks, so nothing of my information is going to change as far as my Twitter and my Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter, Patrick Ellis WX, Facebook, Patrick Ellis Meteorologist, and very.
Uh-oh.
Oh, that was convenient, Patrick.
Yeah, I felt like we had some breaking news there.
I know. I was wanting to know where Patrick's moving to.
Where's Patrick going?
Maybe since he's leaving, they've already pulled the plug on him.
Yeah, really. They heard him.
And there went his contract right there.
We'll have to. We'll talk to him off of the air and see if we can get the scoop of where he's moving to. I hope he's staying around here locally.
Yeah.
That would not be good if he's moving off, but we'll still include him in our discussion. So, but yeah, wow. Well, I guess, that it's kind of awkward to end like that. So we'll talk about next week's show, we're going to have Grant Gilmore on, and we're going to talk about how to make a forecast. I'm sure Chris Michaels will maybe join us next week. And then the week after that...
Why not, man? We might as well keep it going. I'd like to meet Grant.
We might as well, yeah. And then the next week, Chris, we do want you on this show. This is our second big show of the year, I feel like. We're actually going to have the social media debate with Brad Panovich, Grant Gilmore, and I don't know if we've confirmed Nate Johnson yet or not, but I know
yeah,
we've been talking to him.
He's a busy guy, so you'll have to see about that, but that'll be interesting.
He's got something called kids that seem to get in the way.
Yeah. But yeah, oh, I see Patrick's rejoining us. Maybe we can get
here comes the breaking news.
But yeah, we're gonna have our social science show on October 15th. So we're looking forward to that. Brad Panovich has really become a pioneer with social science, and he's got a lot of interesting facts and stuff. So we're looking forward to that show as well. Patrick, can you hear us? Oh man, I kind of hate to break it. I'm not doing this news. All right, Daniel, Ricky, you guys want to do your plugs right quick? Oh, Patrick's back.
Kinda.
The suspense.
Patrick, talk about a true cliffhanger. You're telling us you're getting ready to leave, and then you get cut off the air. I don't think he can hear us. Hey, I'll tell you what. I'll go ahead and kind of talk about me a little bit, since I like doing that. You can always email me at marinencwx@gmail.com. Of course, I'm helping with the McDowell weather page, and anytime you got any questions, leave them for me, and I'll try to answer for you. As far as the weather here in Western North Carolina, I don't know if you guys have hit base on that. It's pretty warm. We do have a front coming and some pretty big changes for the weekend. Maybe first frost for the mountains, foothills, Sunday morning. Who knows? That's the models seem to show that, but we'll see if the winds can die down and the radiational cooling can be just perfect. We might get our first frost here in the foothills.
I hope not. All right, Ricky.
Just like Scotty, I hope not either. I'm going home to the coast this weekend up in Virginia, so maybe it'll be a little bit warmer up there along the waters. But you can follow my adventures, my tweets, my daily life and pains of being a meteorology major on Twitter at WXRJM or on Facebook, Ricky Matthews -WXRJM. I did get some good news today. I don't have to take calculus 3. So differential equations counts for whatever I need it for. So that's good news.
I don't know if you guys just read the little chat sidebar that we can all see. I asked Patrick if he could hear us. He said, "Yeah, I can," but someone didn't like that, so looks like they cut him off.
All right.
Anyways, thank you for watching us tonight. Hopefully, we'll have Joey back in full whatever Joey is next week.
Full throttle.
Full throttle. There you go.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can have him back, but thank you guys for watching the Carolinas Weather Group, and we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday night. Somebody's going to say